Welcome to 47 Watch, where we try to help you make sense of the fire hose of executive actions coming from the Trump administration. We started this podcast because, frankly, the pace of presidential orders has become overwhelming, even for those of us who deliberately track this stuff. And just this past week, we've seen executive actions that amount to a direct assault on the Constitution and rule of law. While we provide daily and weekly reporting at 47watch.com, we recognize that many folks absorb information better through audio and video formats. So here we are, breaking down the most consequential moves from the White House in hopefully digestible chunks. The goal is pretty simple: to help you understand what's happening and why it matters, and what it means for our democratic institutions. Because when executive power moves this quickly, we all need to pay attention. Okay, so this past week has brought an astonishing flurry of executive actions from President Trump, each potentially more concerning than the last. Before diving into our main topic of the three most consequential executive orders, let's review what else happened in this dizzying week of presidential actions. Columbia University has officially surrendered to Trump's demands to regain $400 million in federal funding by agreeing to ban masks, empower campus police, and place their Middle East, South Asian, and African Studies Department under oversight of a new senior provost who will review curriculum and faculty hiring. You heard that right. A university is now letting the federal government dictate its curriculum through a new political officer. And meanwhile, cross border trips from Canada to the United States have declined significantly, with nearly 500,000 fewer travelers in February compared to last year. Apparently, Trump's rhetoric about Canada becoming the 51st state and his growing trade war has convinced Canadians they'd rather stay home than visit a country that's treating them like an unwanted house guest, who just happens to also be their largest trading partner. The FBI has reduced staffing in its domestic terrorism office and discontinued tracking tools for such investigations. Yes, the FBI is scaling back work on domestic terrorism right at a time when it remains one of our greatest threats. And that's like firefighters deciding to focus less on fires and more on helping cats out of trees. Now, taking a look at general government operations, we see that the federal workers say DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is making government, believe it or not, inefficient. Who could have possibly predicted that putting a tech billionaire with zero government experience in charge of efficiency would lead to requiring weekly activity reports, restricting equipment purchases, and dedicating precious work hours to scrubbing documents of DEI related terms? And speaking of DOGE, Trump's interim Social Security chief has threatened to shut down the agency's IT systems. This potentially halts payments to 71 million Americans if Elon Musk cannot access non anonymized personal data of Social Security recipients. This is all despite a judge restraining order barring such access due to privacy law violations. So essentially, they're saying, give us your private data or we'll cut off your benefits. And that feels a less like government service and more like government extortion. And the Social Security Administration also announced new rules requiring in person identity verification for new applicants and existing recipients who want to change their direct deposit information. Now, this goes into effect next week and comes as the agency plans to close dozens of offices throughout the country and lay off thousands of workers. They're essentially telling people they have to show up in person while at the same time removing all the places they can show up to. The U.S. Postal Service has confirmed plans to lay off more than 10,000 employees as part of a cost cutting measure in collaboration with DOGE. And this is all despite the service generating $78 billion annually. And it turns out that the Department of Government Efficiency primarily achieves all this efficiency by making sure there are fewer government employees, which is kind of like making your car more efficient by removing the engine. So let's focus on the three specific executive orders that represent the most significant bureaucratic restructuring in decades. Like the world's worst ice cream sundae, these three scoops of executive overreach come topped with sprinkles of authoritarianism and a cherry of constitutional crisis. So last Friday, President Trump signed an executive order that was titled Stopping Waste, Fraud, and Abuse by Eliminating Information Silos. This order directs agency heads to grant full and prompt access of unclassified agency records data, and systems to federal officials. This is all to identify and eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. It also mandates unfettered access to comprehensive data from all state programs that receive federal funding. Okay, so on its face, this may sound reasonable. I mean, who doesn't want to stop waste and fraud? But the devil, as always, is wearing Prada in the details. This executive order effectively eliminates long standing privacy protections by demanding immediate, unfettered access to vast amounts of citizen data. Now, the administration justified all this by citing an estimated $236 billion in improper payments in fiscal year 2023. But what they aren't telling you is that improved data sharing without appropriate safeguards creates an enormous potential for abuse. The executive order mandates that agencies take all necessary steps within 30 days to implement these changes. 30 days to completely reshape how government data is handled with virtually no public input or congressional oversight. And that's less time than it takes you to read the terms and conditions that you just agreed to. Legal experts have pointed out that giving DOGE unfettered access to personally identifiable information potentially also violates multiple federal privacy laws. And that's why a judge issued a restraining order barring DOGE from accessing Social Security beneficiaries' personal data, an order that Trump's acting Social Security Administration commissioner openly threatened to defy. And what is particularly concerning is that the vague language could allow politically motivated data mining. Want to identify federal employees who might not be sufficiently loyal? Just sift through their records. Want to target specific groups for deportation? Just cross-reference the database. Now, the second executive order, strengthening the suitability and fitness of the federal workforce, resurrects and expands Trump's previous Schedule F classification. And they've now rebranded it as Schedule Policy/Career. We're just going to call it Schedule F. This policy aims to reclassify potentially hundreds of thousands of career civil servants as at-will employees who can be fired without cause. The order stripped job protections from federal workers by designating them as holding confidential or policy-determining positions. And that's a classification that is traditionally reserved for political appointees. Okay, to understand why this matters, we have to take a step back. And since the Pendleton Act of 1883, America has maintained a professional, nonpartisan civil service protected from political interference. This system ensures that our government functions based on expertise and continuity rather than partisan loyalty. And when you apply for a passport or Social Security benefits, you're dealing with career professionals, not political operatives who change with each election. Schedule F effectively demolishes this system. It expands the definition of policy-related positions to include anyone who indirectly supervises employees. And it also allows the OPM, Office of Personnel Management Director, to add any other positions they deem appropriate. So this means virtually any federal employee could be reclassified and fired at any time. Trump and Musk are approaching the federal workforce with all the subtlety of a bulldozer at a china shop. They've already fired inspectors general, they've laid off thousands of employees, and created what observers have described as a culture of fear across agencies. It's kind of like watching someone play Jenga with the foundation of government, yanking out blocks and seeing how long before the whole thing collapses. Experts from UC Law San Francisco have called these orders extraordinary in breadth and potentially a crisis for the rule of law. The Project on Government Oversight warns that this reclassification will make it far less likely than anyone would speak out against abuse of power, waste, fraud, illegal orders, and other types of wrongdoing. And essentially, we're creating a government where loyalty to the president trumps loyalty to the Constitution or the American people. This approach is already manifested in concrete actions. The Social Security Administration announced plans to cut approximately 7,000 jobs while simultaneously imposing requirements for beneficiaries to verify their identity in person, as we just talked about. All this while closing 47 offices across 18 states, and that number of offices is likely not a coincidence. The third executive order, preventing abuses of the legal system and the federal court, directs the Attorney General to prioritize seeking sanctions against attorneys and law firms that engage in what they call frivolous, unreasonable, or vexatious litigation against the United States. So again, On the surface, this kind of sounds reasonable. Nobody wants frivolous lawsuits. But the memorandum goes much further, instructing the Attorney General to prioritize enforcement of regulations governing attorney conduct and discipline over all other things that she could be focusing on, to refer attorneys and law firms for disciplinary action when their conduct appears to violate professional conduct rules, which are kind of defined by the Attorney General, to recommend additional consequences, including reassessing security clearances or terminating federal contracts, and to review attorney and law firm conduct over the last 8 years and recommend further actions if misconduct is identified. And the key problem here is defining what constitutes frivolous litigation. The Trump administration has consistently labeled lawsuits challenging its policies as frivolous, regardless of their legal merit. When Trump called for Congress to impeach a federal judge, yes, he did that, for ruling against his deportation policy, he demonstrated exactly how he views legal challenges to his authority. This executive order effectively creates a mechanism to intimidate and punish lawyers who represent clients opposing the administration. Legal experts have noted that the order's vague language could chill legitimate advocacy and constitutional challenges. Attorneys may think twice before representing clients against the government if doing so could result in losing their security clearance or federal contracts. And this is not protecting the legal system. It's in effect weaponizing it. So, together, these three executive orders represent an unprecedented expansion of presidential power and a fundamental challenge to our constitutional system of checks and balances. The first order centralizes vast amounts of data in hands of politically appointed officials, raising serious privacy and civil liberties concerns. The second order dismantles the professional civil service, replacing expertise and continuity with political loyalty as the primary qualification for government employment. And the third order intimidates the legal profession, potentially deterring attorneys from representing clients challenging government actions. As one legal expert put it, while some may legitimately applaud the policy goals that underlie some of these actions, I hope we can all agree that these policy goals should be pursued lawfully, lest we end up living in the type of system envisioned by the president where he is the only law. And with Congress largely aligned with the president and showing little appetite for oversight, federal judges have emerged as the primary check on these executive actions. But when the administration openly defies court orders without consequences, even that check appears to be increasingly fragile. So the real problem is that the constitutional breakdowns don't happen all at once. They occur gradually, with each breach of norms making the next one that much easier. It's like that famous frog in the slowly boiling water. We risk not noticing the danger until it's far too late. So where do we go from here? Legal challenges to these executive orders are already underway. Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility has sued over Schedule F, and multiple states have filed lawsuits challenging various aspects of the administration's actions. But litigation takes time, and these orders are being implemented now. Federal employees are being fired. Data is being shared, your data, and attorneys are being put on notice. The immediate effects are already being felt across the government. The ultimate check in our system remains with the people themselves. Public pressure, civic engagement, and informed voting are essential counterweights to executive overreach. As difficult as it may be amid the constant deluge of news, paying attention matters now more than ever. As one defender of the civil service recently reminded us, public servants are now the front line against government abuses. We should remember that many of these anonymous bureaucrats, so often maligned as faceless deep state operatives, are actually the people standing between constitutional governance and something much more concerning. And when an assistant attorney, a U.S. attorney, resigned, rather than drop corruption charges against a Trump ally, he wrote in his resignation letter, "I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me." That kind of principled stance may prove our best defense against the dismantling of our democratic institutions. And in the meantime, we'll continue to monitor these developments and provide updates as the situation evolves. because sometimes understanding what's happening, as uncomfortable as it may be, is the first step towards doing something about it. You can stay up to date with all this constitutional chaos at 47watch.com, where you can subscribe to feeds of analysis of executive orders, breaking news items, this podcast, and more. We've included links to all the relevant executive actions and news stories in today's show notes so you can dig deeper into any topic that caught your attention. Thanks for listening. And remember, staying informed truly is the first line of defense in preserving our democracy. These are very difficult times, but they're made slightly less difficult when we face them together, armed with facts and context. See you guys next time.